Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Put the Human at the Center of Information Governance, Focus on the Last Mile. A couple of housekeeping items before we get started. You're welcome to submit questions at any time using the chat window on the right-hand side of your screen. We'll address them during the Q&A session at the end of today's webinar. If we don't manage to answer all of your questions, someone will follow up with you shortly via email. We'll also make a recording of the webcast available within a couple of days. It's my pleasure to introduce you to today's speakers, David Lavenda, VP of Product Strategy, and Richard Poole, Chief Technology Officer of EMEA at Harmony. David is a frequent contributor at Fast Company and is a founding member of the Reader Advisory Board at CMS Wire, where he writes a monthly column. David holds a master's degree in Science, Technology, and Society and is now pursuing a doctorate in Information Management, focusing his academic research on exploring the information overload experienced by mobile workers. David is also an international scholar for the Society for the History of Technology. Richard is the Chief Technology Officer of EMEA for Harmony, working directly with Harmony field teams and partners, bringing with him 15 years of experience in data management systems. Richard has helped many companies to realize significant benefits in productivity enabled by collaborative platforms. Richard earned his Bachelor of Engineering degree in Automotive Engineering from Loughborough University. David, please get us started.
Thank you, Susan. And I'd like to kick off today's webinar talking about putting the human at the center of information governance by focusing on the last mile. And we'll explain why it's so important to focus on the last mile by looking at really what some of the challenges people have with information governance initiatives. And we find that the top reason for failures in SharePoint-based information governance initiatives is often related to not focusing on the human elements of it. Now, this is a very complicated process. There's many steps involved in being able to capture, classify, find information that's both stored in documents and in emails. And like most technologies, SharePoint and some of the other associated technologies are very much focused on the process. How do I get, what steps do I need to get the information in? How do I, how many metadata fields do I need to complete? And when you look at the process, from a process standpoint, everything makes sense. But when you look at what people need to do to conform to those processes, that's where all the trouble starts. Because it's very difficult to get people to change what they're doing and do something differently just because the initiative dictates it. And the outcome of not focusing on the human when you're building these systems to capture and classify and help find information for information governance is really twofold, we find. One is you either end up with very low SharePoint adoption because people just simply don't use SharePoint. It's way too difficult to do all the multiple steps it takes to save an email to your desktop, then go to the browser in SharePoint, upload the document, upload the email, try and find it, add the metadata. It's a lot of steps. People don't want to get involved in those steps, and they all often look to do just what's easy. What's easy is a lot of times, if it's documents, it's just sending document attachments. Otherwise, it's just keeping the emails locked in my own inbox where they're not accessible to other people. The other thing that happens with SharePoint adoptions, with SharePoint-based initiatives, is that people treat it just like a shared drive. And what they do is there's no real organization in terms of information. People just dump documents there. And we say that that's the place, SharePoint becomes the place where documents go to die. So if you would take a step back and put the human into perspective and focus on making it easy for people to do what they need to do in order to be compliant, then these initiatives would be much more successful. So the human is the weakest link in the chain, and that link in the chain is often associated with what we call the last mile. So that last mile is when you actually put the information into the system, classify it correctly so it can be found later on. And you all know that from an information governance standpoint, you might do a great job defining a taxonomy, even setting up automation like approval chains for approving emails and documents. But if you can't get the documents and the emails, and today emails are increasingly considered documents. We know that about 80% of information governance content is actually emails, not Word or Excel documents. If you don't get those into your system and classified correctly, the initiative will not be successful. So considering that step of what it takes for people to be able to do what they need to do in order to get the information into the system and classified correctly, that piece of the taking the human into account is really critical in ensuring the success of your information governance initiative. So what do you need to do to solve this last mile problem? Well, as I've been saying right along, you need to put the human at the center of this initiative, and it really comes down to what I call the 4 C's of solving this problem. The first one is capture. So you need to make it easy for people to capture documents and emails. As I said before, a lot of content that needs to be captured for information governance or compliance initiatives today are really emails, documents in the form of an email message. And the way you make that simple is by allowing people to continue to work within email. So instead of making them go to a browser and upload documents and emails, make it very simple for people to do that in the place they're already spending their work time. And we'll see all of these shortly as Richard walks us through exactly how Harmony puts the human at the center of the initiative by fulfilling the 4 C's necessary to solve the last mile problem. So the second C is classifying. It's not enough just to get the information into the system. You need to be able to classify and categorize the emails and documents so that they can be found later. Otherwise, as I said before, SharePoint just becomes a document graveyard. And you need to reduce the need to change behavior because the more steps you add in that process of what people need to do to upload and categorize documents, every step that you add reduces the amount of information that you're going to capture, and therefore reduce the ability to be compliant with what you're trying to achieve. The third C is claim. So you want to be able to easily retrieve documents in emails, and you need to be able to organize the information the way people think. So if you're using metadata or managed keywords, you want to make it easy for people to be able to specify what they have in mind directly through their normal process of uploading and classifying information without adding different steps or having to go to a browser and fill in missing information. Every one of those steps reduces the compliance. And the last C is collaborate. So it's not enough to just get all the information into the system and be able to find it. The overall goal is also to get everyone on the same page. So if you want to, you're working on a contract or some client correspondence, you want everybody to be working from the same document. You don't want to have document attachments where everyone has a different version of the contract or a different version of the correspondence. You want everyone working from that same document. So using links instead of attachments is critical, and to be able to do that simply with an email is something that that we'll be seeing in just a minute exactly how we do that. The second way, besides fulfilling the 4 C's, we also, to make this process human, you can't really dictate where people need to go to do this. So you want to do it as capture people where they spend their time. People spend most of their time in email today. Studies show that people spend almost between 70 and 80% of their day within the email client. So allowing them to work on in Outlook wherever they are, whether they're on a desktop, on a Mac, Outlook in a browser, even on mobile devices, you want to enable people to work wherever they spend their time, whether they're in the office or on the go. Again, by making it very simple for people to do what they're normally doing, that's the way you humanize the process, reduce the room for error, eliminate the weakest link in the chain, and therefore fulfill compliance and governance requirements. And where possible, you want to be able to automate some of the processes. And this is one of the new things that we'll be showing today in the upcoming demo, is a way to automatically capture emails. So not only have we always made it extremely simple to drag and drop and to upload emails to SharePoint, but now we have a way of automating this process while enabling the business person to maintain control. So they can decide what the criteria for the emails that need to be captured. Those will automatically be captured into SharePoint while we leave the control and the power of that process in the hands of the individual. So make it easy to help people do the right thing, not wrest control away from them because IT or the project managers think they know better. And with that, I'm going to turn controls over to my colleague Richard Poole, who will demonstrate and explain exactly how Harmony fulfills these requirements that I've just been talking about, and walks us through the 4 C's by looking directly at the product, and then we'll be happy to answer questions. There also is a question box that you can type questions as we go along, and we'll be happy to entertain those. So Richard, I'm going to turn this over to you. Take it away.
Thank you very much, David. So Harmony allows you to work within your email client because that's where business users spend the majority of their work time, and they really just want to get their job done. So that way, with Harmony bringing SharePoint into the user's typical workspace, you don't have to learn to use a new product. It's intuitive. It's already there in front of them in an environment that they're familiar with. And staying in email puts the human at the center because you can stay in your comfort zone, and ultimately you drive better governance with your business users. So here we can see Harmony as a sidebar on the right-hand side of my Outlook. I have access to my SharePoint sites, the sites that I'm following, my OneDrive, my Office groups, all in one place. And so I can start to easily just drill down into, for example, here a sub-site that I'm actually working on as part of a project that I'm a part of. And then I can drill down into the content as well, so we can see that I've access to my document libraries, the documents that are already there, the emails, folders and views, and any combination of what you've got configured in your SharePoint library structure. So what we can also do here, because we're in the email client, we can simply drag and drop content into the sidebar to capture it. So for example here, if I drag an email into the sidebar, it will be stored as a fully contained MSG file. It's flagged up in my Outlook as being saved to SharePoint, so I can see the location it's been saved to. I can also see over here on the right-hand side that it's been captured, and if we take a look at some of the metadata there, we'll also see that important header information is actually captured. So automatically capturing that kind of metadata, like the subject, when the email was received, who the email was sent from, vastly reduces the amount of steps and therefore the effort that an end user needs to expend to be compliant. And it really puts the human at the center because you consider what the human needs to do in order to get their job done, but also be compliant with the systems that you've put in place. Let's just go back to our document library and our standard view there as well, because maybe I've also got some documents that I've received, and I want to capture those into SharePoint too. So I can simply drag and drop attachments in the same way I could with my emails. And in this case, Harmony understands the different content types that you've got defined in your SharePoint libraries. So we can see here that it's actually going to prompt me for the type of content that I'm putting into SharePoint. And again, kind of, prompting for that really helps the user to work effectively with your information governance rules and the compliance that you've got in place. So if I just go ahead and select that content type, you'll see that I'm then going to be prompted for any metadata that content type requires. And this really humanizes the information governance process, because it becomes easy to find the documents and emails that you've captured later on in the process without making people expend a lot of effort to find what they actually need. And we'll take a look at that a little bit later, as David said, about kind of like finding content. So here we can see that I've got a couple of required properties that need to be actually filled in so that this document can be made available to others. So here I just need to set the status, and in this case the solution that we're working on. Maybe it's a records management project that we're working on here. So I'm going to go ahead and save that and check it into SharePoint. Again, Harmony understands all the configuration that you've got in your SharePoint environment and filters that through and surfaces it into your Outlook environment. So now I can also navigate in a number of different ways around my content. So we saw that I drilled down into this document library, but also I can display the structure of my sites here as well. So in this case, I want to actually navigate to a different library where all the correspondence for this particular project resides. So we can see here that we've actually captured some emails already on this particular project, and mimicking the kind of familiar steps needed to navigate, for example, on shared drives. But now with SharePoint, in an environment that's familiar to the user, really humanizes that information governance process by making it easy to do the right thing and easy to capture content, easy to find content. So what I want to do now is actually, I'm going to compose a new email and to David, and say that I'm working on a project here. So let's say that this is Ravenwood, which is this particular project, and I'll say, hi David, are we ready to go with this project? And I'll just send that on its way. Now Harmony actually prompts me to say, do I want to store that email that I'm sending to David into SharePoint? And it actually recognizes the location that we've just browsed to, this correspondence library. I've got access to navigate through my SharePoint structure and also anywhere that I've marked as a favorite, and we'll come on to that in a moment as well. But I'm just going to save that email that I'm sending to David, and we'll see that that will get captured automatically without prompting the user to fill in anything. It's capturing that header information as the email is going out. And obviously for future reference, then it's all traceable. We can see who's discussed what and when. As I mentioned, we can also navigate favorites as well. So I can actually mark locations that I'm accessing on a regular basis as favorite locations. And here, what I can also do is actually mark that as an Outlook folder as well. So if I just do that, you'll see that now in Outlook, I've got access to a folder to show that I've got my correspondence library there. So now what I can do is I can create some rules. So for example, if I go to create a new rule, that any email that contains something like Ravenwood, in this case, in the subject, I want it to be moved into that particular folder. So let's say I'm going to set that for the correspondence folder there and create that rule. So now, when David actually responds to that email, it will automatically go into this correspondence library in SharePoint because I've created that rule. So automating the capture of emails in that way really reduces the burden of having to figure out what to upload and then remembering to do it each time you receive an important email. So you can really make it easy using Harmony, but nevertheless leaves you in control of the process and therefore making the human again the center of the intelligence of what rules need to take place. So empowering you to decide what gets kept and in what way keeps you in control. And that's the ultimate in humanization, making it easy to to retain the overall control over the process. So if we just refresh that view for a second, you'll see that David has just replied to that email. Again, it's automatically captured all the header information without the user having to fill any of that in, and he isn't prompted for anything. So if I just double-click on that, I can see that David has given me the go-ahead to reply and start working on that particular proposal or on that particular project, and he's asking me for the proposal. So in that way, I can reply back to David's email, and we can see that I can obviously browse through my SharePoint content. So not only can I browse, but if I go to, for example, let's say my document library there, I can then search for what I need to find. So just clicking into the top of the sidebar, Harmony actually presents me with a search capability, and this is using standard SharePoint search capabilities from the SharePoint search services. So for example, now I can say that I'm interested in proposals in this particular library. So here I can see I've got a number of different proposals, and I can capture the relevant proposal that I need to send. So for example, I can then drag in the content, or if I haven't found what I'm looking for, I can go and navigate to that particular project or that documentation. So here we can see the proposal for Ravenwood there, and I can simply drag and drop that into the body of the email to create nicely formatted links that I can then send to David. So let's say, hi David, here you go. So working with links rather than multiple and possibly conflicting versions of the truth ensures that everyone is on the same page, and in this way Harmony promotes real collaboration and creates a true network of collaborating and contributing individuals. And that's the ultimate way to humanize the overall information governance process. With that, I'll hand over back to David.
To learn a new interface and to be able to dramatically increases SharePoint adoption and makes you more compliant. Secondly, Richard also showed how you can treat emails as documents of record. Of course, today, as I mentioned earlier, emails are, quite a number of emails are documents of record as is, and therefore need to be captured into a shared space like SharePoint so that they can be accessed and used by other people in the organization, and certainly for governance and compliance in many instances in industries. We showed how really simple it is to classify using metadata, so make it really simple, prompt users when necessary, automate the process of capturing email headers directly as SharePoint metadata as well, so that you can find information the way people think about it, not in terms of the name of the document, but what types of metadata, how the information was cataloged. Lastly, there's one point that we didn't have time to talk about in today's webinar, but is extremely important, is the ability to also be able to access information offline, whether you're on a mobile device or you're on a laptop perhaps that's not connected to a network. And Harmony has a lot to say about how that can be done easily, making it very simple for people without, again, having to learn new interfaces or new ways of working. directly either from the email client or also on from the desktop or from a mobile device as well. I'd like to thank you for participating in today's webinar. And with that, I'm going to pass this over to Susan for the questions that have been rolling in as the webinar has been going along.
Thank you, David, and thank you, Richard. While I am going to read the questions and let David and Richard answer them, I'm also going to put up a question. If you would like to speak with a Harmony collaboration expert, please answer yes, and someone will contact you. And with that, I'll go directly to the questions. You showed how emails and documents are combined in SharePoint from your desktop, which is what you just spoke about, David, but what if I'm using an iPad or a smartphone? Richard, can you speak to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So as David did just mention slightly at the end there, Harmony is also available on mobile devices, both as a standalone app itself, but also we do integrate to the Outlook mobile clients as well to allow you to capture emails and attachments, map email headers, fill in metadata, and also work with a rich interface. Again, as David mentioned, both offline and online, and also kind of capture things like, for example, photos from the mobile device, or annotating PDF documents, or working on Office documents on an iPad or an Android tablet. And we do support all of the major platforms, iOS, Android, Windows Phone, and BlackBerry 10. And we also support all of the major MDM vendors as well for kind of secure access from mobile devices.
Thank you, Richard. Moving down. If I move to Office 365, want to get the functionality that you're showing here out of box with my subscription? David, would you like to speak?
Yeah, thanks, Susan. So, yeah, the problem remains even with Office 365. There's really no practical way, for example, to be able to capture emails directly from there. Working from the browser also remains a challenge. As I said, the key to making this easy is to allow people to continue to work from their comfort zone, which is the email window, the drag and drop, being able to drag and drop emails, capture header information automatically, specify metadata information easily, share links easily, all within the comfort of the place where people are spending their time. And most of these, if not all of these, are not available out of the box with Office 365.
Thank you, David. The next question is, I'd like to store my emails with attachments. Can you explain how to do this, Richard?
Yeah, absolutely. So as we saw, we can kind of drag in emails and attachments separately as separate entities into the sidebar. But also when you drag an email in, if it has an attachment, that attachment will actually remain inside the email that you're capturing. So those emails are actually stored as fully contained MSG files, which is the native format of Outlook. So if there's any attachments that you've received, they will remain in the email that you then store into SharePoint. And that's important from a point of view of records of what was received. So if you then open up one of those emails that had attachments that you've captured into SharePoint, it will still have those attachments there. So you can see who sent what attachments, when, why, all those kind of things, and it's therefore fully traceable for future reference.
Thank you. I see a follow-up question to that, which is, can the email attachments be stored separately?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you want to store the attachment as a separate entity itself, which can therefore go through its own metadata, its own workflow processes, for example, then you just drag in the attachment itself. It's really very intuitive to drag in exactly what you need to get into SharePoint. So whether you need the email with the attachment or the attachment on its own, then whatever you drag in is what's going to be saved into SharePoint. And therefore, obviously, the metadata, the corresponding content types, and as I say, things like workflows and things, if they are applied to those items, they will automatically get kicked off in the background.
Thank you, Richard. So the next question I see is here, without a subscription, can I test out the scenarios that you showed in this webinar?
Well, we have a couple of different versions of the product that we showed today. So I was showing Harmony Enterprise for Outlook. There is also a free version which you can download from our website to try it for yourselves. That does give you the ability to capture content, drag and drop, and send links and things. There are a few functions and features that are not in the free edition, things like the email header mapping and things like that. So if you do want to try out some of the enterprise features, then please contact us to request an evaluation license of the enterprise edition.
Great, thank you. I see we have more questions than we have time, but I still would like to ask another couple questions, okay?
Okay.
Here. Is it possible to connect multiple SharePoint sites at the same time?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, as we saw right at the beginning of the demo, I actually had a list of different sites that I was using. So I was using an Office 365 environment, but I also have a number of on-premise environments. And Harmony supports all of those in combination with each other. So we do have customers that have mixed environments. So, for example, they might have some, very sensitive data which is stored on-premise, but their less sensitive data might be in Office 365 or vice versa, just depending on the kind of industry and the geography and things. And Harmony allows me to connect to multiple environments in exactly the same way. So from an end user's point of view, they get the same user experience, but they can be working in different environments. And also, you can even copy and paste content from one environment to another, and you can switch there backwards and forwards between them. So Harmony really does add a lot of value there where you've got different environments as well.
Great. So that's great, Richard. Thank you. One last question. What do you need to do in SharePoint to make this configuration that you're showing today?
Okay, so Harmony is a client-side application, so it's very simple to roll out, deploy, and manage. There's very little you need to do specifically for Harmony on SharePoint. But for example, where you're capturing emails, we do recommend that you have a specific content type for the email items with specific metadata. And we even provide a feature pack that you can then run in your own environment, automatically creates that content type with those corresponding columns. You can also use existing content types if you have them in your own SharePoint, in your existing columns and things as well. So you can really configure Harmony to either work in your existing environment or do facilitate making it easy to add the necessary components to move forward.
Great, thank you, Richard. If we haven't answered your question, someone will get in touch with you and answer within a very short time. Thank you, Richard and David, for that excellent presentation, and thank you all for joining us today. You'll receive an email with a link to view the webinar again within a couple of days, and we look forward to meeting you again at our next webinar.